What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. May is over, which means it's time for another monthly wrap-up where I rank all the new releases that I saw from worst to best. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your favorite movies were in May, as well as your least favorite. As always, this is just my list, not a definitive ranking. And make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. Also, if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. Now, some of these I'm going to be a little quicker about than others, as I saw 26 new releases this month, which if you saw my other monthly wrap-up videos, you'll know that's a little less than I normally get to check out per month. But I was a little busier than normal lately, and I obviously can't get to every single movie in a timely manner to begin with, so there were a couple of films I wanted to see that were released in May that I didn't, but I did manage to catch up with a few from earlier in the year that'll be on here. So let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about them. In last place is Skull the Mask, a slasher movie that should have been way more fun than it turned out to be. It tries to recreate the feel of 1970s grindhouse horror, though does so with a Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees type killer. And whenever we focus on this character, it actually was kind of entertaining. But the problem is, we also get way too many scenes of all these different characters who have this vague connection to this mask. And not only is it not clear who we're meant to root for, but it's also incredibly difficult to follow, with a needlessly convoluted plot, on top of the movie taking itself more seriously than it needed to, taking on a tone that doesn't fit with this sort of premise. And because the majority of the movie was focused on these overly serious, underdeveloped characters, it undermined what little fun I had with this, making for a pretty joyless experience overall. At number 25 is The Woman in the Window, the long-delayed film from Joe Wright that once had some potential Oscar talks behind it, but I can assure you those hopes are now long gone. This is an attempt to pay homage to Hitchcock as well as the film noir genre in general, and while this can be stylish, the execution winds up being less than the sum of its parts. I didn't care for the acting, nor did I find the tension to be all that believable, and its attempts at trying to replicate the noir style come off as too in-your-face, and less like the fun it was supposed to be. It's a shame this turned out to be the misfire that it was, considering all the talented people both in front of and behind the camera. At number 24 is The Columnist, which might not be one of the year's worst movies, but it goes down as one of the most frustrating watches of the year. It's a film that seems like it's trying to have a message, but it's never quite sure what said message is supposed to be. It starts off with some nice potential, trying to be a satire on hate-fueled, toxic internet culture, but it throws much of that out the window after a while and becomes a straight-up serial killer movie with little to no emotional depth or cleverness. It touches upon a few different topics that are pretty timely, but unfortunately, it had nothing to say on just about any of them, and it left a lot to be desired. At number 23 is French Exit, a quirky little film that kind of reminded me of the 1930s screwball comedies in a way, and it's another film that was also positioned as a potential Oscar contender, mainly for Michelle Pfeiffer. Now, that unfortunately didn't really come to pass, but Michelle Pfeiffer herself was very good here, with this very snarky, rude sense of humor that gave an otherwise restrained movie a lot of life. Unfortunately though, besides her performance, this didn't really come together for me. There were times the story felt a bit aimless, and it was also hard to really root for any of the characters, even though the performances themselves were good, mainly because they were all meant to be standoffish or emotionally distant, and everyone just felt too much at an arm's length at all times that I had a hard time really getting on board with this. At number 22 is Those Who Wish Me Dead, and these next few I consider to be either decent or movies that I liked, but I just say proceed with caution when watching. The latest film from Taylor Sheridan tries to be a throwback to 90s style action thrillers where it's a lone hero against a ruthless killer, or killers in this case, and it's entertaining enough with this nice cat and mouse between Angelina Jolie and two killers played by Aidan Gillen and Nicholas Hoult, and everyone did a fine enough job and the action was pretty good, but it's a very generic movie that definitely felt like it could have gone a step further than it actually did, in terms of both the action as well as the characterization. It's good for a casual watch, but it's not a must-see or anything. At number 21 is The Djinn, which is yet another simplistic, atmospheric horror movie taking place over the course of one night. While this is a well-made movie, and I didn't dislike it, it doesn't do a whole lot that we haven't seen before, to be quite honest. I'd have been fine with the premise feeling a bit familiar if they'd at least do something different, and they didn't. And what results is a very repetitive hour and 20 minutes. That being said, there are still some great creepy moments, and it has a really compelling lead performance by Ezra Dewey that arguably saved the movie. Plus, there's at least a good payoff in the end. And while I ultimately enjoyed it enough, I think it probably would have been even better had it been a short film in my opinion. At number 20 is Without Remorse, the latest Tom Clancy adaptation, taking place in the Jack Ryan universe, but instead focusing on Navy SEAL John Kelly. The story's pretty by the numbers here, and parts of it can feel predictable, and it's really nothing we haven't seen before. Besides some entertaining action scenes, this is basically saved single-handedly by Michael B. Jordan, who takes advantage of every opportunity he can get to inject some emotion into an otherwise lackluster film. And because we do care enough about him, it helps us stay invested. Now, it's not a bad watch overall, but these really aren't my sort of movies to begin with, so because it doesn't do much to make itself stand out, it's nothing I'm rushing to revisit anytime soon. At number 19 is Profile, another movie taking place all via computer screen in the vein of Searching and Unfriended, and this is directed by the man who produced those two other films. I don't think this is quite as good as either Unfriended or Searching, but it's still fine for what it is. The film's editing is great, and because of the fast-paced nature of the story, it does make this an engaging little thriller. Though it doesn't go higher on this list for me because the film really does stretch its credibility in a number of instances, particularly due to the lead character making some of the worst possible decisions that could have easily been avoided. So it relies on you really suspending your disbelief in order for it to work. Though, if you're able to do that, then this won't be a bad watch overall. At number 18 is Sound of Violence, probably one of the most creative movies I've seen all year, being a slasher movie about a formerly deaf woman who needs to hear violent sounds in order to retain her hearing, leading her down a very gruesome path. The main draw that makes this movie so engaging is our main character luring people into these Saw-like traps that lead to these over-the-top moments of gory violence. And if the movie was made up primarily of these scenes, it would have been a little higher on my list. What holds it back a bit for me, though, is anytime it steps out of the horror genre, with some poorly written melodrama involving the supporting characters, along with a tacked-on subplot with a detective trying to solve the case. So it's definitely a bit uneven. But it still wasn't a bad watch, mainly due to its horror elements, as well as a great lead performance by Jasmine Savoy Brown, who really holds it all together. At number 17 is Army of the Dead, Zack Snyder's return to the zombie genre after the unrelated Dawn of the Dead. I just talked about this in my Zack Snyder ranking video, making this the third time where I'm giving my thoughts on it, so I'll keep it short. It was fun enough for what it was. I just think that its 2.5-hour runtime was not warranted by any means, especially as it loses its group dynamic in the second half and drags out a number of the sequences in the second half a bit too long. And once it moves away from the humorous banter and its more over-the-top elements, it does lose some steam. But in the end, it's still pretty entertaining overall. At number 16 is Monster, a film that was supposed to be released in 2018 before sitting around for 3 years until Netflix picked it up. That's usually the sign of a really bad movie, but this actually isn't bad. It definitely has some of your usual corny dialogue that goes with legal dramas, but it was still an engaging story. And it's a bit of a time capsule in a way, since this was made right before a number of the cast members really took off. So we see actors like John David Washington and Jarrell Jerome appear in these pivotal, but really one-off roles. Now, as for the story itself, I was invested the entire time, but what held it back from me was the fact that the characterization could have been stronger, as they feel like they're at arm's length at times. So while it's a good enough watch for the performances, as well as for what it has to say, had these issues been fixed, it would have been really powerful. At number 15 is The Killing of Two Lovers, a film that I didn't know much about going into it, beyond the fact that it received critical acclaim from a ton of people who saw it, though I didn't quite love it as much as everyone else did. And while it's not a bad film overall, the problem I had with it was that I had a hard time getting into the right mindset as far as what kind of movie it's supposed to be. The title, along with the opening sequence, set the stage for more of a thriller, but it turns out this is more of a restrained relationship drama, though you never fully realize that that's all the film was truly going to be, as you'll have sequences where our characters have these outbursts and you think that things are going to boil over in the worst possible way with an explosive, action-packed sequence, but those never actually come. I think had it removed that opening sequence, which I don't think was even really necessary, it would have been to the film's benefit. I think now that I know what kind of movie this actually is, I can watch it again and maybe appreciate it a lot more, but I didn't appreciate the way this film misled us. At number 14 is Oxygen, and everything from here on out I consider to be at least good and a full-fledged recommendation. This is a little sci-fi thriller that will feel like one part Buried from 2010 and one part Moon from 2009. And while this does feel a bit like other films we've seen before, it all comes down to the performance and direction, and I think both worked well here. Alexandre Aja did a great job of capturing the claustrophobic feel of being confined to this one location, while Melanie Laurent did a wonderful job of carrying much of the film on her shoulders, giving a surprisingly energetic performance despite not being able to move around so much. At 101 minutes, it surprisingly moves pretty quickly, and does a great job of consistently holding our attention. So while it might be a little familiar, it's certainly worth a watch. At number 13 is Cruella, which I gotta tell you, I was really expecting to place this one a lot lower on here. I really had no expectations for this whatsoever. I felt let down by these last few Disney live-action remakes that I was ready to hate this one, but it's surprisingly pretty enjoyable. And that's thanks to both Craig Gillespie's work behind the camera and Emma Stone and Emma Thompson's work in front of the camera. This is funny, energetic, and visually appealing. And despite the feel from the trailers that it was going to be like this Joker, Birds of Prey sort of movie, it actually has a voice all of its own. Now, I still did have some issues with it. I think the third act isn't anywhere near as strong as the first two, which is what kept it from going higher on here. But my problems with it aside, it was honestly one of the better Disney live-action reimaginings that we've gotten quite a few years. At number 12 is Plan B, the technically second directorial effort from actress Natalie Morales, which is one part Never Rarely Sometimes Always and one part Booksmart. It's a film that borrows pretty heavily from other movies, with this two best friends have one wild night out formula, and for that, I could see it rubbing some people the wrong way. But what this film lacks in originality, it makes up for in charm, wit, and humor. It's consistently funny, and it relies heavily on the chemistry of our two main leads, who I gotta say did a really nice job together. Their talent and their comedic timing, along with an overall sincere feel, made this one worth watching. At number 11 is High Ground, an Australian action western with some social commentary thrown in there regarding the effects of colonization, and I thought it was a pretty solid effort overall, blending its thrilling moments with its message really well, without ever coming off as too heavy-handed or too far removed from reality. It's a methodically paced film, though one that I wouldn't say is boring, as we get some beautiful cinematography and solid performances on display to keep us engaged. There's one major storyline that comes off as really predictable, which is what held me back from placing this even higher on the list. That aside, I enjoyed the film, and I hope it gets some more attention, as I feel it's going to slip right under the radar. At number 10 is Spiral from the Book of Saw, a series revival that I didn't think we were really looking for, but for what it is, I had a good time with it. This is kind of the same as the other movies, and different at the same time, as it focuses more on the mystery side of things, rather than running parallel with one giant trap as the other movies did, so this feels more like Saw meets Seven, though while it kinda sorta does something different, it eventually falls back into its comfort zone. But because I always liked what Saw's comfort zone was, I was okay with it. Part of it was due to how over the top it can get as it progresses, and also due to the charismatic lead performance by Chris Rock, which definitely elevated this a lot for me. It's far from a great movie, and I am grading it on a curve as a longtime Saw fan, but I did enjoy it. Though, to be clear, if you're not a fan of these movies to begin with, I don't think this will be the one to win you over. At number 9 is Fried Barry, a film that's basically the anti-E.T. This is a sci-fi horror comedy that is basically just 90 minutes of an alien possessing a drug addict and going throughout town for a night filled with sex, drugs, and violence. It's a visually striking film, but one that won't be for everyone, as it can feel quite trippy at times, and it also lacks an overall purpose or meaning. There's less of a character arc involved, and it's more a series of very funny, if very weird, vignettes of this alien on a hedonistic night out. Because of that, it might be hard to really care what's going on, but if you like these weirder sort of movies, and you're looking for something that's just pure fun, I think you'll enjoy this. At number 8 is The Paper Tigers, a loving tribute to martial arts films that basically poses the question, what if the Karate Kid grew up? And that is played for laughs, though that one particular joke does tend to get played one too many times here. But this is still a film with a big heart and a lot of charm, and that often seeps throughout here, focusing on three former kung fu prodigies that have to come together in the wake of their master's death. The chemistry among the three main cast members is what drives a lot of this film, as they're all very funny together and have such a great rapport that you can't help but smile. It tends to go for a very crowd-pleasing feel, which leads to some instances of it being predictable, but it's still very well intentioned, a lot of fun, and definitely worth checking out. At number 7 is Wrath of Man, which is probably the most fun I've had with a Guy Ritchie movie in quite some time. I don't think it's necessarily on the same level as Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and it's easily one of his most serious films in some time, but this was still a really engaging, well-crafted story overall. It's filled with some really brutal fight scenes, a nice story structure told partially out of order, and it's carried by a solid lead performance by Jason Statham. All in all, if you're looking for a slick, well-made crime thriller, look no further. At number 6 is The Dry, a hard-boiled detective drama that was a huge hit over in Australia and has received a ton of critical acclaim. Now, I didn't quite love it on the level that so many others did, mainly due to some pacing issues, but it's still a really solid watch overall. One of the main reasons being that Eric Bana gives us what's probably his best performance in quite a long time, as this man who's not only trying to solve two different murder cases, but also deal with the grief and resentment hanging over his head due to the history he has with this small town he once called home. It's one part crime thriller, one part character study, and it all blends together to make for a pretty good time overall. At number 5 is Together Together, which might go down as the year's most adorable movie for me. I thought this was absolutely sweet, as it explored this very unique relationship between a father-to-be and the surrogate of his child. It's the sort of film that feels like your typical indie comedy, and you think it's eventually going to go down this romantic comedy path, but it surprisingly doesn't. It's actually a bit subversive, though I also wouldn't call it ambitious, as it's not full of high-stakes, super emotional conflict or anything. But that's also its biggest charm, as it's a really nice movie to just sit back, relax, and make you smile for 90 minutes. I had a really fun time with it, and I'd say definitely seek this out if you just want to be put in a good mood. At number 4 is Benny Loves You, an absolutely bonkers horror comedy that you think is just going to be this unimaginative Child's Play knockoff, but actually turns out to have a personality all of its own. The movie is absolutely off the wall, with the title character having some of the most chaotic energy I've seen in a film all this year so far, which leads to a lot of bloody, over-the-top violence. And while a lot of the film's draw is Benny in action, what makes it work so well too is that we actually have other characters we care about. It's not a movie that's too deep by any means, but our main characters, Jack and Dawn, are written with these very snarky, charismatic personalities, and we can enjoy their banter even during the moments in between Benny causing destruction. So it allows the film to have a consistency to it, making it a film that can endure as possibly one of the year's biggest cult classics. At number 3 is A Quiet Place Part 2, a film that took what was originally intended to be a one-off story and expand upon it, but without breaking the rules set up by the initial film, retconning anything, or contradicting the tone, look, or feel of that 2018 hit. It picks up right where the first Quiet Place left off, and the transition is seamless, and it gives us another win for John Krasinski as a director, whose work behind the camera I will very much be looking forward to now, if his future films are even going to be half as good as this. While this does feel a little more blatant in setting up future films as opposed to the first movie, I think there's still a lot to appreciate here, between its overall sense of dread, its sound mixing, its score, and the performances, especially with the addition of Cillian Murphy, who gets quite a lot more to do than I was expecting. This will make for an excellent double feature with the first Quiet Place, and if you haven't seen it yet, definitely get on it. At number 2 is The Mitchells vs. the Machines, easily one of the year's most creative films, more than anything else. It's produced by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, and even though they don't have a hand in writing or directing this, it's amazing how it still feels like their personal style is injected into this, feeling very much like the Lego Movie in particular. It hits us with a ton of jokes at a very rapid-fire pace, but presented through some really fun, unique animation that's nothing short of breathtaking. And mixed in there is a sweet, if a bit predictable message about family, making this something the whole family will easily be able to enjoy together. But in first place is Riders of Justice, which is now my current frontrunner for favorite movie of the year. The film is one part dark comedy, one part character study, and one part revenge thriller. And for some, the differing styles coming together might not 100% work. I've heard some criticisms people had for this, saying that the tonal shifts were jarring. And if you haven't seen it yet and decide to check it out, there's a chance you may feel the same way, especially with comedy being as subjective as it is. But for me personally, that was not an issue at all. I found all the differing styles to blend together really well, never really going too over the top in one direction or the other. It's darkly funny, but never mean-spirited. It's action-packed, but doesn't become cartoonish with its violence. And while it can be pretty emotional, it's also not heavy-handed. This is one of the sharpest scripts I've seen all year, thanks to writer-director Anders Thomas Jensen, and the work of the cast all around was fantastic, though the standout is of course Mads Mikkelsen, who gets to be badass while still act as a fun straight man for the antics of these three geeks who help him get revenge for the death of his wife. I had an absolute blast with this. It has everything I'm looking for in a movie, and it's my #1 movie of the month. And that's that for May. Even though I saw a few less films than normal, there was a lot I was looking forward to, and I was happy to see that most of the ones I was excited for lived up to expectations in one way or the other. Of the 15 movies on my most anticipated movies of the month list, 11 out of 15 got a 7 out of 10 or above, and of the remaining 4, there was only one I flat out disliked. So I consider that a win, and hopefully it looks like things are looking up from here, as movie season begins ramping up and we have plenty to look forward to. But let me know, what was your favorite movie in May? Was it anything I listed here? Was there something I missed that I should have seen? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.